War broke out by chance. There was a meeting of 60 foreign ministers underway in Paris. That included our Foreign Minister, Nanaia Mahuta.
She was there to talk politics in the Indo-Pacific region, but it was quickly overshadowed by Ukraine. Now, back in New Zealand, I asked her what it was like to be there when Vladimir Putin upped his nuclear alert level.
As you can imagine, everyone started to quickly amplify their diplomatic effort, but also amass their understanding of the implications. Again, every forum I attended expressed their deep concern for what was happening.
I mean, it is escalating and ongoing. Kiwis remain in Ukraine. What support are you able to provide them?
Right now, we have the ability to provide some consular support. We have about 31 people registered on the Safe Travel register. We did put out an early travel warning while things were still at a relative level of peace and there had been no invasion, to just let people know that it was the best time to leave. Now it would be very difficult to try and support people directly. However, we encourage people who are still in Ukraine to regularly update their whereabouts with the Safe Travel Register.
So the consular support, I mean, would they have to get through to Poland? Is that what support you can provide?
Yeah, well, and as we've witnessed, there have been huge numbers exiting Ukraine to get to Poland, but our travel advisory went out prior to Russia's invasion of the Ukraine.
Yep. OK, so while you were over in Europe, you called Russia a bully in a speech to the UN. I guess if you're taking that hard stance, why haven't we kicked out the Russian ambassador here?
Yeah, we've called in the Russian ambassador. In fact, that happened fairly quickly.
Sure, but why haven't you kicked them out of the country?
Yeah, look, with those, we're certainly considering a range of other measures in addition to the travel bans, export controls and the diplomatic engagement that we have had, and expressing our concern to the Russian ambassador.
Sure, but
as the Prime Minister foreshadowed in the House, there are a range of other measures which we intend to be taking.
OK, well, let's get to those in a moment. But can you tell me what's holding you back from expelling diplomats? What are you worried about?
Well, no, it's not about being worried. We have incrementally and progressively tried to ensure that we're elevating our response as we're witnessing what's happening over in Russia. Now that Russia has invaded the Ukraine, there is a war happening. Another set of responses will be developed. Okay. And the Prime Minister indicated that in the House.
Yeah, sure. OK, apart from those other responses, what would it take for you to say, Russia, go home from New Zealand?
Yeah, I think I'd like to consider that in a very measured way, to the extent that the next range of measures provide us another opportunity to turn up the dial on Russia and to express our strong concern that what they are doing is wrong. They should de-escalate. They should get out of the Ukraine. And war is not the solution here.
Well, what is in the next range of measures that you're talking about? What else can you do?
Yeah, so what we've, and I certainly got a good sense of the united approach that European nations were taking in response to Russia. And so, you know, we're currently working on a set of targeted sanctions because this war is unjustified and unprovoked.
So what are those sanctions?
And the Prime Minister foreshadowed that we are working on that approach.
OK, so look, she has foreshadowed that, but this is urgent, isn't it? It's urgent. It's happening now. The war is ongoing. Lives are being lost. And do you need to step up the process? Are you just being too slow here?
No, not at all. In fact, immediately when Russia encroached into the Ukraine, we applied the sanctions that we did have available to us. Just last week, the Prime Minister made a statement in the House regarding Russia, and I made a similar statement over in the Human Rights Council. We have seen things escalate. We are putting to Cabinet a set of approaches in relation to sanctions regarding Russia. Prime Minister foreshadowed that, and it is going through its process.
Right, so will we see on Monday a new suite of sanctions announced against Russia?
We will see Cabinet's, it's my intention to put to Cabinet an approach that could enable us to turn up the dial on Russia, be in step with other countries, because they are taking a progressive approach to applying sanctions to ensure that Russia hears unequivocally what they are doing is wrong.
Yes, I appreciate that is the position. So does this mean that it is autonomous sanctions like the opposition has been asking for? Are you stepping away from following the United Nations where Russia has a veto and choosing our own sanctions? We're being outside the UN.
Yeah, one of the things we've got to recognise, and this is something I got a first-hand view on, is that there is a huge level of multilateral support for targeted sanctions on Russia because the war that they are currently undertaking is unprovoked and it's unjustified and it is in breach of the UN Charter.
Does that mean you're going to freeze assets?
When we see the world responding in a multilateral way to sending a very clear and strong message to Russia, that in itself, I think, indicates just how urgent this issue is,
so we'll see
how the global community are responding.
So we'll see the details soon. Also, in your speech at the United Nations Human Rights Council, you said we must not let diplomacy fail. So, you know, an idealistic, lofty statement. What does that mean practically? What can we do to help the diplomacy?
Well, the whole point of the United Nations and the UN Charter was to uphold the international rule of law. And if we say that there's no place for that, then that whole legacy of commitment towards the United Nations and promoting international law has been wasted. I don't think it has, though. I think there is always a place for diplomacy. I do believe that there is an opportunity still now to encourage Russia to withdraw and retreat from its current aggression. In fact, we are aware that there are talks continuing around safe passage of Ukrainian citizens to be able to exit Russia. There is always a place for diplomacy, but it really requires all parties to be committed towards an outcome that doesn't lead you down a road towards war.
OK. You mentioned the refugees for people to depart Ukraine. UN says there's more than 1 million that have already done so or been displaced. Nationals calling for a humanitarian visa for family members of Ukrainians in New Zealand. Is that something that the government is considering?
Yeah, look, those are matters that will be considered within the context of our own immigration law and our ability to prioritise. Can I put that into context? Because I did meet with the president of the UNHCR, and they forecast that as a result of the war in Ukraine, there is likely to be about 5 million displaced Ukrainians as a result. That's a huge number, and I know that it's really important for the global community to identify what it can do to provide humanitarian support, but also to address the significant challenge of displaced Ukrainians who may ultimately be long-term refugees.
Absolutely. What can we do for them?
Well, we are always willing to step up to the plate when it comes to a humanitarian response. My colleague, the Honourable Chris Farfoy, no doubt will be considering the range of opportunities and tools that he has available to him to make a specific announcement in that area, and I'll leave that up to him.
OK. New Zealand officials have just met this week with their Chinese counterparts. Now, I mean, there's a deepening relationship between Russia and China, and the New Zealand officials said or encouraged China to use its Russian influence and access to help with the situation in Ukraine. What does that mean?
Well, Russia and China enjoy a close relationship, and again, this is the pathway of diplomacy. If friends of Russia can express that war is not a solution, that would be a very helpful thing indeed. But New Zealand, in terms of expressing our concern, trying to find diplomatic pathways, trying to join diplomatic efforts to de-escalate situations, we're really consistent on that front. So the CE of NFAT in undertaking his meeting has only been amplifying what our position has always been, which is try and use diplomacy as much as we can.
Do you hold out much hope for diplomacy or putting any pressure on China in that regard, given that Putin and Xi Jinping met just recently about the time of the Winter Olympics and put out that statement which said there were no forbidden areas of cooperation between them?
Yeah, look, I think New Zealand should be seen to always be trying to find a diplomatic solution and try really hard at pursuing that avenue, because the alternative is war. The alternative is that lives are lost. The alternative means that there is not a regard for international law, the international rule of law, as there should be. And that's what keeps our communities, our regions stable, harmonious and prosperous.
Just finally, Minister, you've said that you want to have tirohanga Māori, Māori worldview at the forefront of your approach to foreign affairs. How does New Zealand achieve that in a situation like this that we're facing?
Well, it's not binary. What we can say is that in promoting peace and reconciliation, that is absolutely consistent with a long-held position that New Zealand has advocated at the United Nations and other fora, using diplomacy as a means to, reject war as an answer is something that New Zealand holds close to its foreign policy approach. And in many ways, manaakitanga and mahitahi is reflected within that type of an approach. So I don't see it as a binary one way or another. I see it more as integrating a bicultural approach to enhance New Zealand's values and interests as it promotes its foreign policy objectives.
Foreign Minister Nanaia Mahuta, tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, kia ora.